Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Your host, Derek Champagne, is the founder and CEO of The Artist Evolution, a full-service agency building successful brands, marketing tools, and campaigns, and also the author of the best-selling book, Don't Buy a Duck. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to inspire you to become the best leader that you can be. I am super excited about our guest today, New York Times best-selling author of Love is the Killer App, How to Win Business and Influence Friends, and his most recent book on sales collaboration, Deal Storming, the Secret Weapon That Can Solve Your Toughest Sales Challenges. Tim Sanders, welcome today.
Derek, I'm glad to be with you.
Man, I got really excited. I had both of your books already, but I got really excited getting the chance to interview you. You've got a cool story, and I'm going to kind of just share your background for a minute. You spent most of your early career on the cutting edge of innovation and change. You were an early stage member of Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner's Broadcast.com, which had the largest opening IPO in history. It's incredible. Opening day. And then after Yahoo acquired the company, you were tapped to lead their ValueLab, which enabled sales teams to close hundreds of millions of dollars in new business. 2001, you rose to position as a chief solutions officer, and then later the company's leadership coach. 2005, you founded Deeper Media, which conducts research and provides consulting and training services for leading brands. And you focus, you're an expert on sales strategy, leadership, collaboration, innovation, a master storyteller, and so many more things. But let's get into it today. Let's talk about, tell us a little bit about your journey and some highlights in your early years, and then we're going to talk about some of these key topics that you're such an expert on.
So I've got to say, Derek, I have a pretty checkered past. I was raised on a farm by my grandmother in Clovis, New Mexico, just east a little bit of the state, right there on the border between New Mexico and Texas. Okay. Had a really interesting childhood, was a special education kid from the 2nd grade to the 6th grade. So you can imagine I learned how to stick up for myself when I got to junior high school back with the regular kids, but it taught me a lot about grit and determination, and it helped me understand that the best time to develop relationships is long before you need them. And I carried that into my professional career. In 1997, I had the good fortune of being hired by Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner at that startup. It was originally called AudioNet, and it broadcast audio and audio games, mostly sports. Later, we became Broadcast.com, and then after Mark sold the company to Yahoo for whatever that amount was, he ended up buying the Mavericks. He didn't want to go to the Silicon Valley. I think he didn't really dig what was going on at Yahoo. Obviously, that may not have been a bad decision. Right. But I did. I wanted to go be part of something really cool. This is like the year 2000 at this point. So my family and I moved out to the Silicon Valley just in time for the dot-com crash. Right. We literally got there, and 3 months later, the rug got pulled out from under everybody. And I faced an incredible challenge, and that was to help our sales team replace $800 million of lost revenue. You see, Derek, we were doing business with other dot-communists. It was very common practice back in those days. So our big customers were like eToys, Drugstore.com, and Webvan. Remember those names? Right. And we weren't in business as much as we should have been with real legacy companies like Walmart or Procter & Gamble, because in sales and marketing, that's what you call that account, Procter & Gamble, and Nike and Disney. So my job was to build the team, go back into the market during a recession, and convince traditional advertisers that there was value in the Yahoo platform. And that was an incredible business experience for me. Highlight here, I traveled over 300 days a year for 3 years straight.
Wow.
So spent a lot of time listening, spent a lot of time at a lot of traditional companies learning from them and mentoring them, as well as where I thought the world was going to go in terms of e-commerce and digital marketing, et cetera. And I'm happy to say we were successful in keeping the ship afloat, at least. Right. And then in 2005, by the time I got to there, I'd already written a couple of books. I was getting a lot of offers to speak on the lecture circuit, and I felt like it was a good time for me to go off on my own. And at the time, some of my lieutenants at Yahoo were going to new companies like the Facebook, et cetera. And I had an opportunity to consult with them, and I went that direction. And so since then, what I've been doing is a lot of research. I've written 5 books altogether, and 50 or 60 times a year, I have the wonderful opportunity to speak on the lecture circuit. So that's my journey. But, I think what's important to understand about the journey is that I was very fortunate as a kid to have a grandmother who taught me the value of building relationships, caring about people regardless of who they are, and making investments in my future by learning each and every day. And I've carried that forward into every piece of my career.
I love that. That's so powerful. And one reason you're talking about it is because a lot of people don't do that. And myself included, I got so busy with building my business and doing and kind of in my own world that I wasn't always looking to invest in others and build relationships and pay that forward. And it was something I didn't learn until my late 30s. I wish I had learned it sooner, and I'm still learning it. But
we take breaks from it too. I mean, I got to say that in my mid-20s to my mid-30s, I kind of took a pause for it because I'm like you. You have a kid, you get into accumulation mode. The idea of reading books an hour or two a day seems like a waste of time. You think you're going to do it before you go to sleep, you don't. The idea of building relationships gets confused with networking. Networking is not about building relationships. It's just another sales and prospecting move we make to find new connections. So you can make a pause. And I was just so fortunate in my mid to late 30s to kind of have a renaissance back to those days when I was younger and I had to build relationships literally to avoid being bullied. And I was just in the right environment working for Mark. His culture was make love, not war. That was his approach to doing business. And I also got to say that he and a couple of the buddies that were around him, they were such voracious readers. I understood that they were a step ahead of everybody else that was reading blips and newspapers, et cetera. And I kind of got addicted to reading, and that was a real catalyst for my career growth. And I still say it, 20 years later, book readers are better leaders.
That's awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'd love to talk to us about love. You talk a lot about love, and you've got this amazing book, Love is a Killer App. And you preach about that. You just talked about Cuban talking about make love, not war, but you've really taken it to a whole nother level. Tell us about that. What does that mean?
The most powerful force in business is not greed or fear. Those are the most poignant stories that we hear about. Really, when it comes to long-term success, not just for 1 year, but for an entire lifetime, the most powerful force in the entire business world is love. And what I mean by that, Derek, is the most powerful force we have as a leader is for us to care about the success of people that we lead and for us to have compassion about the customers that we serve. And if you don't really care about the people that you lead, you will not be a successful leader because they know, and they were born with their arms reaching out. So love is a magnet for success. So let's talk sports. I love the analogy of sports because I don't have to sell this to a successful coach. He knows that to love his players and his staff is probably the most important decision he'll ever make. And let's talk SEC football for a second. So if you listen to the interviews with Davo after Clemson has the surprising win, which was just an amazing game, right? What did he talk about? He talked about at halftime, they talked about love in the locker room. They talked about how much they loved each other and how much they were going to work together for each other. They talked about how much they loved the fans and how much they wanted to take care of them. And that was a conversation. And this is not unusual. I study this all the time in professional as well as collegiate sports. It needs to apply to the business world, but it doesn't because we're afraid. I have this theory I've been developing for a new book. I call it ego economics. Ego economics says that high-functioning people, we usually become leaders, we get the title, we have an ego that is just as big as our intellect, okay? And it kind of grows at the same time. And we don't want to look stupid. We don't want people to take advantage of us. That's all ego talk, by the way. Okay, really, all that stuff really doesn't matter. So ego economics says I help 10 people. 2 of them come back to me and say, "You've changed my life," and they're grateful to us. 1 of them merely says, "Thank you." 5 of them don't say anything. They go on with their life, and 2 of them take advantage of us. They either take our information and compete with us. They take our information and claim it as their own. Whatever they do, 2 of them take advantage of us. Let me tell you what the ego does. The ego takes that 2 and makes it the entire 10. We say to ourselves, "I'm never going to help anybody again." We don't care about those 2 people who we changed their life. Here's what I've learned about ego economics. The most powerful thing you'll ever do to stay in love as a leader with the people that you lead is to always assume people are paying it forward. Don't expect reciprocity, because as a leader, people will disappoint you, because that's not how things really work. Right. You know, we talked earlier, Derek, we get busy. I mean, I can even tell you that when I was younger, I know people that helped me, and I feel like I never properly thanked them. I feel like I never properly credited them. But the way they helped me changed me as a person. And when I had opportunities to help other people, I did. It's just, I'm afraid we don't close the loop. So here's the 2 takeaways, you know. Assume people are paying it forward. And remember, you were just like them when you were younger. It's such an important decision that you make. And for those of you listening that somebody's helped you, please pick up the phone and call them today and say, "I appreciate you mentoring me. I appreciate you networking me." That's like sunshine, right? Because you're helping those people have faith in helping other people. So I think right now that's a real psychological challenge. Really high function people.
I really love that. I've not heard it said quite that way. I love that. The ego economics, they assume that they're paying it forward, which is great because it allows you to continue to have faith and to continue to invest, but also to not expect reciprocity, because it's probably not going to happen. That's really great, because I think a lot of times when we do pay in, we do the way we're validated is we see some kind of reciprocity, or at least some kind of validation of that we're doing it, so that we continue. So that's a great mindset. I really like that.
And let me go wonky a little bit here psychologically, because I study psychology a lot. You have to in the world of leadership. Right. Leadership is half psychology and half grit. The norm of reciprocity is one of the deepest seated instincts in Western culture. It is just as strong as our taboo with incest. Okay, it's that strong. When you're a little kid and you go to the restaurant and the server brings you the cute little pancakes with the funny face, and she goes to the trouble to put the cherry, and she sets it in front of you, and you dig in with your fork, your mom slaps you upside the head, and what does she tell you?
Say thank you.
You come home from school, and they've been picking on you at school, even though you're the same size they are, and you tell your dad they're picking on me. He says, "Boy," what does he say to you? "Stick up for yourself."
Right. Yeah.
Reciprocity is a cadence that parents have, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing, I guess. Pay your debts, push back. But that doesn't mean we should expect that as leaders. That's a very dangerous idea. As a leader, I'd rather mentor somebody and think I've just created a new mentor than have him thank me on LinkedIn or send me a Starbucks gift card, because that's not going to improve the world 1%, right? So for those listening, the word love is a scary word in business because it's often misunderstood. And I can tell you, Derek, when I went to my publisher in New York and said, "I got this idea. I want to write a book about love in business," they went, "Whoa, can we talk about something safer? Because that's a weird deal. We don't love people. Love doesn't belong at work." And I'm like, wow, it doesn't make any sense to me, because I've had a chance to hang out with some of the best leaders. They use that word all the time. So what I had to figure out is the difference between the personal love we have for our family members and the professional love we have as leaders, because it's different. And here's why. We have a social contract at work to do our job and to think about the company's survival and to meet our charter that the owners or the shareholders or the investors get their money back. And that is a moral obligation. Right. We can't, out of some sense of love, let people take advantage of the company, because that's not what I'm talking about. Sure. So I came up with this definition, and I know it's going to be kind of jargony, but I call it biz love. It's a particular brand of love that we as leaders bring to work every day. This is the kind of love where you share your intangibles, your knowledge, your network, and your human compassion to promote success in other people. And as a leader, when you think about the customer experience, you put love as the central motivation when you're designing that experience, meaning you care about the customer's happiness and satisfaction as if they were you. And that's what I mean. I believe that a smart leader is a tough love person. Herb Kelleher was originally referred to inside Southwest Airlines as a love cat. That's where I got that phrase. I used it in the book. Okay? If you've ever met Herb, this dude is a tough dude, okay? If he loves you, he's going to love you like your grandmother loves you, with a lot of accountability, all right? Because grandma doesn't look the other way. She makes you go pick your own switch. You know what I'm saying? Right. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really having an emotional attachment for people, but having a specific desired outcome. For your people that you lead, success and development. For the people that you serve as customers, happiness and satisfaction. And if that's the case, then I don't see why a leader wouldn't be comfortable thinking about love as being a key building block right there with intelligence and fortitude.
That's awesome. I love the concept. Tell me a little about, so if there's listeners who have not been practicing this, or who, I'm open on this show about how I've been an entrepreneur for many years of my life, most of my adult life. And I really woke up one day and realized that I looked around and said, oh, I'm leading a team. I've got to step into this role. I didn't intentionally always say I'm going to lead people. I wanted to create things and just work on my craft that I was passionate about. And so since then, obviously, things like this show have prompted me to seek it out and talk to rock stars like you that have learned it. But what does someone do that's listening and says, I haven't practiced that? What are some first steps to take? Because it sounds great, but how do you implement it?
Okay, yeah, exactly. So here's the idea. What you need to do every day at work is to find opportunities to share your knowledge. This is where you start. If nothing else, the most loving thing you'll ever do in your life is to study on behalf of the people you lead and then share what you've learned. In every interaction, in every conversation, bring a gift, and that gift is helpful advice. I believe that for us to take an hour every day to read out of a book that is specifically dealing with our challenges, the challenges our business face, the challenges our employees face, that's an act of love. Because reading books is hard. That's why people don't do them. Right? Cuban used to always quote Bobby Knight, because he was like a Bobby Knight dude, because he's an Indiana University guy. And he used to always quote Bobby saying, everybody wants to win, but only a few people are willing to do the hard work to prepare to win. I'm telling you what I've learned through his experience and the experience of so many people I've met in my life. I could name drop, but I hate name droppers. Sure. Reading books is hard. But when you read books, you deeply understand complex subjects, and you understand them in such a way that you could actually transfer that knowledge in conversation. You're not going to get that from a blog post. You're not going to get that from a tweet. You're not going to even get that from reading a research report. There's a commitment level involved. And there's this thing I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years where I think about the mix of what I read. Every other book I read prescriptively. In other words, I buy the book to solve another person's problems that I do business with.
Wow.
I did something. I know that we have this in common. I spoke at the ACDA a few years ago. So when I thought about the challenges in the industry for dentists, I began to go read about customer experience from a medical standpoint. It completely changed. I read Joseph Michelli's books. I studied the Sharp healthcare experience. And I was able to read all of that on their behalf. And then when I met with them, I say, here's the things I've read. Here's my notes. Here's the insights I got from it. You would have thought I gave them a gold bar. But the point is that it starts with sharing knowledge, because you'll develop loyalty and trust. People will accept your knowledge, whether you're being a mentor or merely a helpful person in conversation. Once you establish that loyalty and trust, it's really important for you to share your network of relationships. Your network is your net worth.
Right.
It has the power to solve any problem anybody you ever meet has. But you got to be careful. Because that's your network. It's really important. You don't just put people together because, they want to meet your people. You got to be smart. You got to be a good matchmaker. You share your network to help people get to the next level. You develop an instinct for putting together the right people that have the right personalities and the right passions, and you become a master salesperson of connections.
Wow.
When you're going to put Derek together with John to work on this idea for this marketing plan, I ain't throwing it over the fence with an email.
Right.
It's a process. I talk about it in the book. I'm going to call you first, Derek, because you're the benefactor. You're going to help John. And I'm going to say, dude, you got to answer this email I'm about to send you. And then I call John and say, you know, Derek's a really important person. Don't ignore this email I'm about to send you. And then I send an email with LinkedIn profiles and I sell it. And then I'll follow up with both you cats in a few days to see if you've had a conversation. But here's the most important part of this approach. If you guys get together, you hit it off, you form something, it turns out big, I'm going to forget we ever introduced. I don't expect anything. That's kind of a gadget play. It's worked for me for years and years and years. In marketing, we talk about surprise and delight. Right? There's no better surprise and delight than to somebody to give you a gift with no strings attached. And here's what I've learned. When I put two people together that should meet and I get out of the way, but I made sure they got glued together, I didn't change their world. I merely gave them one piece of the puzzle, right? And they have to do all these things on their own to turn that into gold. And I'm humble about that because the greatest connectors of the world are not only generous, they have a deep sense of humility about what they're really doing. So anyway, that's the second thing you got to do. And then the third thing I want you to think about doing every day at work is to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I mean that in the most literal sense. It's important for you to use your imagination strategically. This is important for leaders. So it's important for you to have better conversations with your people about how they're feeling, what they're going through, and to learn how to be powerless when they're vulnerable. When they tell you, hey, I'm really afraid about how you've reorganized our compensation plan, your job is not to roll your sleeves up like some bad manager and tell them you shouldn't feel that way. That's not empathetic. Your job is to understand why they feel that way. Dr. Stephen Covey, in his last book, The Eighth Habit, it's a great book if you haven't read it. He said that people sometimes, they just want to be heard. And like in arbitration, he learned that in a high percentage of cases, when the plaintiff feels like she's been heard and her feelings have been respected, they settle. And he found that's true in leadership, it's true in marriage relations. Empathy is a superpower for leaders, but we have this wall, right? When we're a little 5-year-old, we catch feelings. We're like a pet. We catch feelings. And then as we get older, we kind of develop this wall because we have all of our own problems and we go to work and other people's negative emotions, they actually make us upset. And we respond with things like, you shouldn't feel this way. We try to talk them out of their feelings. So if one were to write down 3 words that you can live by to be a very compassionate leader, write these down. Feelings are facts. And that changes everything. So knowledge, network, and compassion, lead with those as you build relationships, and you will build a real stronghold, and you will be a better leader.
Wow. That's awesome. Study, read books, share the gift of helpful advice. That helps you start to develop loyalty and trust. Share your network of relationships. Become a master connector, not expecting reciprocity. You're just helping connect one part of the puzzle, and then literally put yourself in other people's shoes. And don't do what we tend to want to do as leaders, or as a spouse. I do this often. I think it's my job to help solve things. Roll up my sleeves and solve it. I'll take care of it. No problem. You're overwhelmed. This is happening. I can fix it. Here's a solution. Be powerless with them.
Yeah, exactly. And for those leaders that say, yeah, but what about the repeat offenders? That's actually a Raising Arizona thing. There are whiners. They come to you. They say, hey, I'm upset. And you listen to them. You understand. You say, I'm really sorry. I get it. Now you're worried about the rent. You just bought a boat. I didn't know that. That doesn't mean you're going to change the reorganization of commission, but you've heard them out. And you go, wow, I didn't think about that. I'm sorry to hear that. You let it go. They come back the next day. Still really bugged about it. Okay. They come back the third day. Now you got to roll your sleeves up and be transparent and tell them what's behind the compensation plan change and why it's better for everybody. But it is that pause between the reveal of their vulnerability and your corrective action. It is that pause that equals empathy. And I'm telling you, getting back to being my Sheldon Cooper wonky scientist guy, if you look at all the research on the benefits that you and I give each other in a relationship, the psychological gifts we give each other, from giving compliments to whatever, the most powerful gift one human ever gives another is validation. You are not alone. You are not the only one carrying around these feelings. So I just emphasize to leaders that to be compassionate means you want to be part of the end of unnecessary suffering.
That's great.
Whether it's your employees, whether it's your customers with your experience design. And if you sign up for that, I'm telling you, at the end of your career, you're going to look back on it, and to quote the Dalai Lama, you're going to enjoy it a second time.
Wow, that's great advice. Love it. Talk to us about some secrets to becoming a highly effective mentor.
So mentorship is a really interesting thing, Derek. I studied this a lot. I'm kind of a fool for etymology. I love the history of words. Mentor goes all the way back to Greek mythology. And what's really interesting is that after Homer's Odyssey, popular literature, and all the movies, Star Wars, Karate Kid, we tend to think that mentorship is like the wise old man helping the young squirt, figure it out. Right. And that's why so many young people were like, if I could just get a mentor, I'm going to be successful. Mentorship is not a shortcut. The true history of mentorship is when somebody helps a hero get to the next stage of their journey by giving them a gift, which is usually an insight. And it's usually a very humble person that's a specialist in one thing. Like in Greek mythology, there's the famous story of Chiron, a.k.a. Goat Boy, who was really good about thinking about the timing of war. And he had the audacity to give Hercules advice, to which Hercules responded by shooting him with the magic arrow, to which Chiron begged the Greek gods for death. The word menos, which is where mentor comes from, not only means mental, but one of the key definitions is courage. The mentor is fundamentally a courageous person. I believe it's really important for you to get in where you fit in and share what moves things forward, even if it's with your customer, even if it's with your boss, even if it's with someone of equal status at work. Yes, sometimes the experienced person can help the newbie, but just open the lens a little bit and think of mentorship as an opportunity for you to give and to help a hero. So here are the rules of being a better mentor. Number one, only pick heroes. This is so important, Derek. I'm very cognizant of time constraints. That's why my philosophy is nice, smart people succeed. Right. So I don't mentor takers. Adam Grant wrote a wonderful book called Give and Take. He's a social scientist out of Wharton, and he's learned that givers need to really focus on helping other givers. That's what keeps things moving forward. So I focus on someone who's demonstrated heroic qualities. They're generous, they're ambitious, and they're courageous. To me, that's a hero. Right? And I see that they're going somewhere usually a little too fast. There's this deficit they have. There's this knowledge delta, and I can minister to that. And that's a great mentor-mentee relationship. I'm going to have a specific goal, a learning goal. I will go back to Karate Kid 1 because it's a good movie in this regard where, Miyagi's goal is to teach the student how to win a particular match with a particular technique. He wasn't trying to teach the kid the secret of life.
Right.
So the mentor picks a hero where they see a delta, they have a specific curriculum, they have a learning goal, they gain pleasure in the student learning, not the student being grateful, okay? As a mentor, you're not doing this for credit or to own people. It's not about being smarter than someone. It's about the person learning. The most important thing about mentorship I learned from Stanley Marcus Jr., who agreed to mentor me on the issues of CRM and retail. This goes all the way back to 1998, 1999. When he would sit down in these lunches, these mentorship lunches, the last 15 minutes where we did dessert, he'd put his glasses on and get his notebook out and get a pen and click it open and then ask me some questions about e-commerce, World Wide Web, email marketing. And I would talk, out of gratitude, I would talk 100 miles an hour like I'm talking to you right now, share a book I've read, set a study, and he'd take notes. And I asked him at one of the lunches, I'm like, Mr. Marcus, I really, am honored to have time to talk to you. You got 40 years experience, but why do we do this? I thought you were mentoring me. And he says to me, if you empower your student to give back, and you pick your students wisely, it will be the greatest learning experience you've ever had. Wow. He said, if you share and then empower the student to give back, he said, you will never get dumber in the act of making other people smarter. He said it was his greatest learning and development program was to always have an active mentee and to have these lunches. So I think that's the trick most mentors don't understand about mentorship. It's a cycle. It's a two-way process. Shane Snow wrote a really good book called Smart Cuts a few years ago, and he wrote about the idea that mentorship doesn't always work. It probably only works half the time. And when it doesn't work, the reason it doesn't work is because the mentor never bothered to build a relationship with the mentee. It literally was a top-down experience. The mentee must feel like they're being respected. The mentee needs to feel like he's been picked as a hero, that the mentor admires him at the same time. They need to find common ground. So when you develop that relationship, the student learns, and we know this from our experience in school.
Wow, that's great. I love that. I hadn't thought of it that way. You pick a hero, someone generous, ambitious, creative. Love that. That's powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, I want to ask you about collaboration. Tell us a little bit about the power of collaboration in your approach.
I gotta say, it's the most important skill set for today's leader. Too often, leaders choose collaboration as a last resort, not a first response. Right. Getting wonky again here. If you look at the history of the word collaboration, for those listening, Google definition collaborate, and you'll find that the number 2 definition that goes back to Middle English is to confer with the enemy. The insurgent and the dissident get together to overthrow the king by sharing strategic information. Here's what I'm saying, Derek. It's coded in our DNA that collaboration's risky, that information's power, especially when you think about cross-department collaboration, because that's where the magic happens. That's what I learned in writing my latest book, Deal Storming. Researchers at MHI found that the companies that have this culture of conscious collaboration across departments in pursuit of big opportunities to save big accounts, they're beating their rivals by double digits in almost every industry because it changes the culture. Because when you bring in different people with different perspectives, you'll never become an obsolete thinker, because it's our constraints that we operate by that become obsolete that cause us to go out of business. Okay, so what I've learned is that whether you're pursuing a big deal, whether you're trying to redesign the customer experience, whether you're trying to open up 2 new offices in a different market, there is no magic idea that's going to solve everything. Okay, right. You're going to solve 100 little problems, and that's how you're going to get to the finish line. So the key here is to understand that rapid problem solving is the secret to business success. If you can solve problems faster than your competitor, you win. And at Deeper Media, we did a study, almost 200 use cases. And what we found is that every time you add a perspective, the chance of that meeting finding the solution goes up dramatically. So let's say, I'm going to go back to a sales situation. Let's say you're trying to save a big account. So usually the sales teams work on that, right? That's a singular perspective. Sure. When you add a second perspective, and let's say you invite the customer service team to be part of this up front, so they can tell you the pitfalls on delivery, right? Your chance in that meeting of finding the solution goes up 50%. Wow. When you invite a third way of thinking, let's say the marketing group, now you got that person in that thinks differently about the sales, than sales does. Your chance of success goes up 100%. But let's say you bring in the fourth collaborator, maybe a champion inside the prospect that likes you but may not be the ultimate decision maker. She's got a radically different perspective. Your chance goes up 300% of walking out of that meeting with the solution. Now think about it, Derek. How often do you think we walk out of a brainstorming meeting with the next play that works in life? Probably our research says 15-ish to 20%. The other 80%, we're going to go off and think about it and have another meeting. Right. That's why meetings are like root canals, right? Right. These 4 perspective teams we studied are walking out with a solution over 70% of the time. Wow. Okay, so widen the perspective, you win. There's a Navy SEALs philosophy. It says that individuals play the game, but teams beat the odds.
But so we're often seeing companies not implement this.
Well, they don't. They say they do. They say, we're really good at teamwork, but they operate out of a silo. Okay, right. And the analogy I always use is think about like a diner. So when the hostess seats you, or the host seats you, the server takes your order, turns it into the cook. Cook puts the order out, server delivers it to you, you eat, busboy clears the table, the same host or hostess, helps you clear your check. Folks, that's not teamwork. It's not. It's line work.
Right.
Okay? It becomes teamwork when your food's been sitting under the lights too long and either the busboy or the host notices it and expedites it to your table. That is teamwork.
Right.
So what we have to understand is that true teamwork requires somebody to get out of their comfort zone. And you're going to do the best job of that in collaborating. So the secret for leaders is you got to get everybody in the room to make that move from me, my department, to we, our opportunity, the why behind it all, so that in the room, they're willing to reveal what they know and share what they think. In deal storming, I outline a process, and I won't go into it, but I will give you, as a leader, I will give you a couple of questions you can ask the next time you want to create a collaboration team to solve a problem that's hard. Okay?
Great.
Question number 1, who has a stake in the outcome? Like, who cares if we win or lose? Who cares how we play this game? That's a really important question to ask, and the majority of your collaboration team should be those stakeholders. Okay, they're your blockers and tacklers. So for example, I'm going to go back to the sales situation. You're trying to win a big new account. And you have to ask yourself, who cares if we win or lose? Well, marketing cares because they were going to use that as a case study. It's really important to our brand.
Right.
Okay. CEO really cares because she's really focused on the opportunity. Okay. Who cares how we play the game? Well, the finance group cares about how we price it.
Right.
Right? And the customer service or delivery team really cares about what we promised. That's your team.
Right.
And see, that's why in the research we found those companies do so much better when they collaborate. Because think about it. If you bring in service and finance early, you never misprice. You never overpromise, do you? And because you involve them early, you can turn the police into the pep squad. And they want to be involved early. So that's the first question. Who has a stake in the outcome? Who has a stake in how we play the game? That's the majority of your team. The second question you ask is, who has expertise about our problem? And what's really important in collaboration is to be willing to honestly and candidly debate the problem, not the symptoms.
Right.
Right? The problem is usually a symptom. The secret to collaboration is to get to the root cause and work on that.
Right.
And too many times the leaders like bullheaded. They're like, nope, this is the problem. I just brought you in to find the solution. But folks, John Dewey said it best, a problem well defined is half solved. If you don't know the root cause of your problem, business is like whack-a-mole, and you are the mole, right? Every time you solve this thing, a new thing pops up. So those are some of the secrets to collaboration. And I think the last thing that's important here is that you should never throw people into a room to collaborate that haven't been prepared fully with a brief and given a few days to think about it. I studied creativity a lot for this book, and I learned that one of the key ingredients to the creative mind that's willing to debate his or her ideas is the incubation period.
Right.
Where they have all the information about this problem, and you've asked them to think about some solutions, and the weekend goes by and they're watching their kids play ball and their mind's all working on it like a dog's chewing on a bone. They make the connections, they get the aha moment, and then they understand the key assumption behind the aha moment. And so they walk into the room kind of lucid about the idea as a whole. So when somebody has an objection to it, they're not defensive. Because they go, yep, I thought about that, but my assumption was this. So I think the deal brief or the problem brief, it can be 1 or 2 pages. That is like the secret sauce I learned in my research that separates the good collaborators from the great collaborators.
That's powerful. You know, us being in a creative business ourselves, to have a couple days to chew on the problem and think of and look at the entire landscape and scenario is very helpful. Look at all the players and have time to digest and think about it. We get so much better results whenever we do that instead of just a quick brainstorm or quick problem solving without all of the information. I love that advice.
Absolutely. And for leaders, I got to tell you, one of the greatest ways you'll develop as a leader is to lead meetings with people that have different agendas and different needs, whatever that is, okay? Anybody can lead a silo meeting. It's easy because we're all going to hold hands and sing Jambalaya, okay?
Right.
But only a real leader can lead a meeting across departments, disciplines, and involves customers, because then you have to learn how to move human beings together to find common ground. Napoleon Bonaparte was asked once about the leader's job, the leader's role. To translate it into English, he said, the leader defines reality and then gives hope.
Wow.
And in collaboration, you will learn to do that.
That's right. You will find reality that way, won't you?
Yes, you will.
Tim, we've got just another minute or two, and I want to share how our listeners can learn about you. But before we do that, any final words of advice you want to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, leaders, you don't love people because of who they are. You love people because of who you are. And while it's important to think about the values of your company, you need to think about the personal values you were raised with, and never forget about that, because what makes you so very special is not what you know, but who you are inside yourself, that human person. So just remember that. Don't make people earn it. Learn how to forgive and move on. And most importantly, gather your motivation from love. Not fear, not greed, not competitive angst, because Derek, motivation is like fuel. Bad fuel in, bad performance comes out. So that's what I want to leave everybody with. We've built a special page just for the listeners to get Love is the Killer app, 5,000-word excerpt for you to read about that. We mentioned deal storming. We're going to provide an excerpt from that book there too, so you can think about collaboration. The URL is timsanders.com/BLS. So it's timsanders.com/BLS, like Business Leader Series.
Awesome. Tim, thank you so much for being our guest. I want to encourage our listeners, man, Tim, you don't name drop. You're a humble rock star, which is really awesome, and you're practicing what you preach, and that's something I really love about you and what you're doing. You've got these amazing books. You've been very, very influential. I enjoyed. I got to look at the Love is the Killer app excerpt, and it's amazing, and I like your stories about
thank you.
Working on Victoria's Secret account, and just so many cool things that you've learned and done along the way. Some big, awesome projects and life lessons and outcomes. And encourage our listeners, go to timsanders.com/BLS. Look up Tim's books as well. He's got 4 books, and one is a New York Times bestseller, that Love is the Killer app, and then his new one, Deal Storming. Tim, thanks again for being our guest, and we look forward to continuing to follow in the amazing things that you're doing.
Absolutely, Derek. Thank you.
All right, have a great one.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.